This is Miss Boo.
There's something I need to get off my chest before I lose the nerve to say it. My daughter killed her teacher. Not on purpose. At least, I don't think it was on purpose. But if I tell anyone what really happened, it'll destroy her life before she's even old enough to understand what she did. I had never done the school run before. Work took up practically all of my time Monday to Friday, but during the last week of summer break, my wife flew down south after her father had a stroke. That left me alone with our daughter Ava. Honestly, I'd been enjoying it. Ava was 6, sharp as a razor, funny in ways kids usually aren't. She looked exactly like my wife, too, which made the house feel less empty while she was gone. The whole drive to school that morning was normal. Painfully normal. Daddy. She always said my name first and waited for me to respond before continuing, like she needed permission to speak. Yeah? Do you think teachers sleep at school? I laughed. What? Like bats? Definitely. They hang upside down in the staff room. She giggled so hard she snorted, then immediately got embarrassed about it. A few minutes later, I asked if she was excited to go back. Yeah, she said. I got the good teacher this year. The good teacher? Mrs. Calloway. She's nice. What about your old teacher? Her face changed instantly. She was horrible. Kids say things dramatically all the time, but something about the speed of her answer made me glance over. Horrible how? She shouted a lot, and she got mad when people cried. That's not great. Ava shrugged and stared out the window. Last day before summer, I played a trick on her. I smiled automatically. Oh yeah? It was Noah's idea first, she said quickly. But I did it. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. We were in the art room, and she went inside the supply cupboard, and I locked the door. She laughed after saying it. A tiny little laugh like she expected me to laugh too. And for a second, I did, because it sounded like harmless kid stuff. Then she added, but I forgot. I felt this cold sensation move through my chest. What do you mean you forgot? But she was already pointing ahead excitedly. That way! That's the school! The drop-off area was chaos. Parents everywhere, kids yelling, teachers trying to herd everyone inside. I hugged Ava goodbye and watched her run toward her friends. Then I heard 2 mothers talking behind me. Have you heard from Mrs. Devereaux? No, apparently nobody has. They said she never came back after summer. I stopped walking. A friend of mine lives near her, one of them continued. Curtains closed for weeks, car still there. My entire body went numb. The art room, the cupboard. But I forgot. I turned around and walked back toward the school before my brain could stop me. At reception, I somehow managed to lie about Ava leaving her sweater in the art room before summer break. The receptionist handed me the key without hesitation. The portable classroom sat behind the school field, isolated from the main building. Blue walls, flat roof, dead quiet. The closer I got, the harder it became to breathe. Inside, everything looked untouched. Chairs stacked, paint trays dry, dust floating through the sunlight. And sitting on the teacher's desk was a handbag. My legs nearly gave out. I stared at the storage cupboard. Please no, please no. I walked toward it slowly, every step feeling wrong. The air smelled stale, heavy. The cupboard door was still locked. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the keys. When I unlocked it, nothing happened at first. Then the door slowly drifted inward. Something heavy rolled gently against the inside wall. The smell hit me so hard I nearly blacked out. I stumbled backward, gagging. She was folded into the corner impossibly tight, like she'd spent her final hours trying to make herself smaller. Her skin had darkened and tightened over bone, fingernails bloody, one shoe missing. Her mouth frozen open in a shape that didn't even look human anymore. There were scratches all over the inside of the door, deep scratches. I think that's what broke me. Not the body, not the smell, the scratches. Because for one horrible moment, all I could think about was her realizing nobody was coming back. I don't remember leaving the classroom. I remember throwing up outside in the grass. I remember crying so hard I couldn't breathe. And I remember only one thought repeating in my head over and over. What do I do now? Because if I tell the truth, my daughter's life is over before it even starts. But if I lie, then what kind of person does that make me?
I went to a serial killer museum last Saturday. About halfway through the tour, I realized they already had an exhibit dedicated to me. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to say which city this happened in. The museum only opened a few months ago, and it's already become a huge attraction for true crime obsessives, which, unfortunately, includes me. I've always been fascinated by people who can actually commit to something, real commitment, not the fake motivational quote kind. I mean dedicating your entire existence to a single goal, no matter how ugly it gets. The museum had all the usual stuff: Bundy, Dahmer, Gacy, glass cases full of clothes, weapons, letters. There was even a section dedicated to Anatoly Mikhailov, the calendar killer. He planned his murders around specific dates he believed were mathematically significant. The guy killed for almost 13 years without getting caught. They had his watch on display. I stood there looking at it longer than I probably should have. I remember thinking how strange it is that eventually every monster gets reduced to objects behind glass. A pair of shoes, a knife, handwriting samples, tiny little artifacts trying to summarize a person. Then I turned the corner and saw my own shoe print framed on the wall. At first, I honestly thought it was coincidence. The plaque underneath read, "Unknown subject, possible connection to 2009 Riverside disappearance. Estimated male, limp in right leg. Recovered items included partial footwear impression, damaged instant camera photographs, aluminum forearm crutches." I actually laughed under my breath when I read that. The crutches. Jesus, that took me back. I was 23 then, still using the cheap gray medical crutches after the motorcycle accident. People trust injured men, especially women. I remember asking her if she could help me lift groceries into my trunk because my leg was acting up. I remember how guilty she looked for hesitating. I remember the sound the trunk made when it closed. Funny the things your brain holds on to. I spent way too long standing there staring at my own exhibit. One of the employees even asked if I was okay. I told her I was just interested in unsolved cases. She smiled politely, but after that, I noticed her watching me from different rooms. Not suspicious exactly, just curious. I moved on and kept exploring the museum, but honestly, the rest of it felt smaller after that, less impressive. Most of those killers got sloppy eventually. Ego does that to people. The weird part is, they got a lot wrong about me. They credited me with 9 victims. 9. I'm at 19 now. 20, depending on how you classify a body they never found. There was another mistake, too. The timeline stopped in 2014. That bothered me more than it should have. I almost considered emailing the museum anonymously just to correct them. By the end of the tour, I'd calmed down enough to enjoy myself again. I even stopped by the gift shop before leaving. Bought a mug, one of those tacky black mugs with blood spatter designs all over it. The cashier was the same girl who'd been watching me earlier. College age, dark hair, nervous eyes. She glanced down at my wrist while bagging the mug. Then she froze. Just for a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed it, but I noticed those things. Her eyes had locked onto the faded scar running across my forearm, the one from Riverside, the one that was clearly visible in one of the old Polaroids displayed in my exhibit. She looked back up at me too quickly after that, started smiling too hard, talking too fast, that tiny shift people make when fear enters the room. And suddenly, I understood something horrifying. She knew, not suspected, knew. I could see it in her face. I should have left immediately. Instead, I asked her what time the museum closed. 10, she said. I nodded and thanked her. Then I walked out to the parking garage and sat in my car for almost an hour thinking. Because the problem wasn't whether she recognized me. The problem was, right before I left the exhibit, I noticed they'd already started adding new items to the display. Items from killings I hadn't committed yet.
I met a woman in Greece in 2019 who somehow recognized me before we'd ever spoken. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but I honestly don't know how else to explain it. Even now, years later, I still think about her sometimes. Not in a romantic way or anything like that. It's more like remembering a dream that felt completely real while it was happening, and then slowly starts poisoning you afterward, because you realize none of it made sense. I was 28 back then. My mum, younger sister and I went to Greece for a short vacation and stayed at this quiet coastal resort for about 5 days. Mostly families there, older couples, very calm atmosphere. Nothing strange about the place itself. I first saw her during breakfast on the second morning. She was sitting outside with her husband and 3 kids, helping the youngest cut pancakes, while the other 2 argued over juice or something stupid. Completely ordinary family scene. But the second I saw her face, something inside me reacted so strongly, it actually scared me. Not attraction, not curiosity, recognition, instant recognition. It felt exactly like seeing somebody you grew up with after years apart. This overwhelming emotional certainty that I already knew her deeply. The feeling hit me before my brain even had time to process her face properly. And attached to it was this really intense affection, like I'd loved her once, or trusted her completely. I remember staring at her thinking, there you are, Jesus Christ, there you are. Which didn't make any sense because I knew for a fact I'd never seen this woman before in my life. Later that day, I mentioned it to my mum while we were sitting near the pool. I expected her to tease me about it, but instead she got this strange look on her face and asked me to describe the woman. The moment I did, she went quiet. Then she said she'd felt something too. Not as strongly as me, but enough to notice, like she recognized the woman somehow. She even pointed out the exact table she'd been sitting at earlier, without me telling her. That was the first moment the whole thing started feeling genuinely wrong. For the next few days, I kept seeing her around the resort, and every single time, that same feeling came back immediately. Warmth, relief, familiarity. It got to the point where just hearing her laugh somewhere nearby would make my chest tighten. And then something happened that completely destroyed any normal explanation I'd been trying to force onto the situation. On the 3rd day, I walked past her table near the beach restaurant while she was distracted talking to one of her kids. I was maybe 2 steps past her when she quietly said, "You cut your hair." I stopped immediately because my hair had been very long for years. I'd cut it short less than 2 weeks before that trip. There was absolutely no way this woman could have known that. I turned around and asked what she'd said, but she looked genuinely confused, like she didn't even realize she'd spoken. "I'm sorry?" she asked. I remember just standing there staring at her for a second, before awkwardly apologizing and walking away, but my heart was pounding so hard I could actually hear it. After that, I stopped trying to explain the feeling rationally. On our last night there, my mum, sister and I were sitting near the pool drinking mocktails when her youngest daughter wandered over to our table. A few seconds later, the woman came over smiling apologetically, and my mum started talking to her. At that point, I figured I'd probably never see her again anyway, so I just decided to say it. I told her I knew this sounded insane, but I had this really strong feeling we already knew each other from somewhere. The second I said it, her expression changed completely. Not surprise, relief, like she'd been waiting for somebody to finally say it out loud. "Oh my God," she said immediately. "I thought I was losing my mind." Then she laughed nervously and pointed at me. "Even your voice sounds familiar." The way she said it honestly made me feel sick for a second, because it didn't sound casual at all. It sounded emotional, like hearing something she hadn't heard in a very long time. For almost half an hour, we tried to figure it out. Schools, cities, jobs, mutual friends, vacations, family connections, nothing matched. We lived nowhere near each other. Different social circles, different ethnic backgrounds, completely separate lives. There was no logical reason for any of this. At some point, the conversation started naturally slowing down, but neither of us seemed comfortable ending it. It felt weirdly important somehow, like we were both circling around something we almost remembered. Then her youngest daughter climbed into her lap and looked directly at me. And I mean directly. Kids usually glance around or get distracted, but she held eye contact with me in this very calm, focused way that honestly made me uncomfortable. Then she smiled and said, "You found each other faster this time." I laughed automatically because I genuinely thought I'd misheard her, but the woman didn't laugh. The colour drained out of her face so quickly I noticed it immediately. "What did you say?" she asked her daughter quietly. The little girl kept staring at me. Then she said, "He still doesn't remember what happened in the water." I swear to God, every hair on my arm stood up. My mother actually spoke first. "What water?" But the little girl just blinked at all of us with this blank, confused expression, like she had no idea what anyone was talking about. Then she buried her face into her mother's shoulder and suddenly acted completely normal again. Her mother looked terrified after that. Not uncomfortable, not awkward, genuinely terrified. She apologized quickly, grabbed her daughter and stood up almost immediately. But before leaving, she looked back at me one last time, and I still think that's the worst part, because the expression on her face wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition mixed with dread, like she had finally remembered exactly where she knew me from. And whatever happened between us, neither of us survived it the first time.
I knew my girlfriend killed my sister, and I still stayed with her for another 7 months. Looking back now, I think that was the moment something inside me broke permanently. Because once you decide you can live with something like that, your brain starts changing in ways you don't even notice anymore. You stop reacting to things properly. Horrible things slowly become routine. It started as a joke gift during a Secret Santa party back in December of 2022. One of my friends thought it would be funny to buy me one of those grow your own girlfriend novelty toys because I was the only single guy left in the group. Everyone was drunk, loud, talking over each other, making the same predictable jokes people always make when they realize someone in the room is lonely. Ethan finally found a woman desperate enough to stay with him. "Careful, mate. Let her reach full size before disappointing her." Everybody laughed. I laughed too because it was easier than admitting the jokes actually bothered me. By the time I got home, I was exhausted and drunk enough that the room tilted slightly every time I moved my head too fast. I emptied my pockets onto the kitchen counter and noticed I'd accidentally brought the stupid thing home with me. The packaging showed a tiny blonde woman in a red bikini with bright cartoon lips and this unbelievably depressing slogan underneath, "Just add water." I remember standing there in my kitchen laughing to myself because it genuinely felt like the saddest object ever created. Then, because I was drunk and lonely and not thinking clearly, I filled a mixing bowl with water and dropped her into it before going to bed. I even kissed 2 fingers and tapped them against the package like an idiot. "See you tomorrow, love." I woke up the next morning to a horrible choking noise coming from the kitchen. At first, I thought I'd left the tap running or something. I walked in half asleep, still rubbing my eyes, and for a second, my brain genuinely couldn't understand what I was looking at. The thing in the bowl had grown large enough that its body was bent against the sides of the glass. Its arms were folded inward unnaturally, soft and swollen like wet insulation foam, while one huge painted eye bulged above the waterline, staring directly at me. Then it made the sound again, a weak, wet wheeze, and I realized it was trying to breathe. I don't think I've ever felt fear like that before. Not panic exactly, more like reality suddenly becoming unstable around me. Like my mind physically couldn't process what was happening. Then its mouth moved. "Help me." Its voice sounded awful, not human, like someone speaking through liquid with a crushed throat. I should have thrown the thing away immediately. Any normal person would have. Instead, I filled the bathtub and carefully carried it there because some part of me couldn't stand hearing it beg. That was the beginning of everything. Over the next few weeks, Stacy kept changing. The porous sponge texture slowly disappeared beneath smooth skin. The painted yellow hair became real blonde strands. Her body softened, warmed, developed weight and movement and expression. Every day she became less like an object and more like a person, or at least something close enough that my brain stopped caring about the difference. She learned frighteningly fast, too. Within a couple of weeks, she could hold conversations normally. By the second month, she knew my routines better than I did. She'd wait for me by the door when I got home from work, ask me about my day, laugh at my jokes even when they weren't funny. I hadn't realized how lonely I'd become until someone started acting like they were happy to see me. That's the part people probably wouldn't understand. I didn't fall in love with her because she was beautiful, even though she was. I fell in love with her because she made the silence disappear. The only problem was that she needed constant moisture to stay stable. At first it was small things, dry fingertips, cracking skin around her lips, her voice becoming rough if the flat got too warm. Then one night I forgot to spray her before bed, woke up around 3 in the morning because I heard movement beside me, and found her sitting upright in complete darkness. Half her face had dried inward like shrinking foam. One eye remained wide and painted-looking, while the other rolled slowly toward me. Clumps of blonde hair had fused together against her cheek in dry strands. She looked at me and whispered my name, but her jaw cracked slightly when she spoke. I actually screamed. After that, I started carrying a spray bottle everywhere, in the car, at work, beside the bed. Sometimes, if she got upset or cried too much, she'd dry faster. You could literally hear parts of her tightening when it happened. Soft little stretching noises from her skin while she begged me not to let her crack. Still, despite all of it, I was happy, or at least happier than I'd been in years. I introduced her to my parents after about 6 months together. My dad loved her immediately. My mother seemed uncomfortable around her from the beginning, though she never explained why. She kept watching Stacy the same way people watch dogs they don't fully trust. Everything went wrong when my sister came over for dinner. The second Stacy saw her, she changed completely. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at her with this strange, fixed expression that made the atmosphere in the room immediately uncomfortable. Later that night, after we got home, she asked why I hugged my sister. At first I laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking. She wasn't. The argument lasted almost an hour. I kept trying to explain that she was my sister, and Stacy kept repeating the same thing over and over again in this quiet, shaking voice. You held her longer than you hold me. Eventually, she stopped speaking altogether. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up and noticed the front door slightly open. Stacy was gone. The next morning, my mother called me crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. My sister had died sometime during the night, after crashing her car near the river road outside town. I remember sitting there holding the phone while Stacy stood silently behind me in the kitchen. She wasn't pretending to comfort me. She was watching me. Later that night, while I lay awake staring at the wall, she climbed into bed beside me and wrapped her arms around my chest. Then she whispered softly into my ear, "You're all mine again." I knew. Deep down, I knew exactly what she meant. And somehow, I stayed anyway. That's the ugliest part of all this. Not Stacy, not the blood, me. Because after a while, loving someone changes the shape of your morality. You start building your life around things that would have horrified you before. Months passed after my sister died. My family barely spoke to me anymore after the funeral. Stacy became even more attached after that. Sometimes I'd wake up during the night and find her standing beside the bed staring at me silently for hours. There would always be damp footprints beneath her feet on the floorboards by morning. A few nights ago, I found her crying in the bathroom. The skin around her shoulders had already started drying and splitting slightly at the edges, tiny cracks spreading slowly down her arms like fractures in porcelain. I held her while she cried against me and listened to her say she wasn't real, that eventually I'd leave her for somebody human, somebody who could age properly and have children and live without needing to be sprayed like a dying plant. I told her none of that mattered. I told her I loved her exactly the way she was. Then I asked if there was anything I could do to help. The crying stopped instantly. She looked up at me and smiled in this slow, relieved way I'll never forget. Then she explained that water wasn't enough anymore. If she wanted to stay stable permanently, she needed something stronger, something living. When she said blood, I actually laughed at first because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. The first time made me sick. I threw up afterward. I couldn't sleep for almost 2 days. But the horrifying thing is how quickly people adapt, because she was right. Her skin became warmer afterward, softer, more natural to touch, and she hasn't dried out once since we switched.
If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe, because the next one might be even worse.